Hello guys, Derashi here. Today I once again will complain about the issue with crit damage in PoE2. In my general video on point 3, I just kinda mentioned it a little bit, as per usual, but in this video we're gonna go a little bit more into details on what makes crits too strong. I've been talking about it for like 6 months now, and I ain't stopping till it's fixed. As a funny little minigame, you can count how many times I'm gonna say crit in this video, because it's gonna be quite a lot of them. But let's get to the subject. What you see in the background right now is gameplay of my character that I purely created to just visualize the problem. Currently it has around 1500% crit damage. With more levels and fighting against enemies on full life, we would be looking at around 1800%. Please note that this character is not a meme, which is just existing to push the crit damage number as high as possible, as it's fully viable build with capped resistances, 3000 maximum life, and converting about 80% of physical damage into elemental and chaos, which gives us protection of medium armor build, I guess. But that's not exactly an issue because we are playing with a crossbow, so we have the advantage of range, so we don't get hit that often anyway. It's far from being min-max in any way for full DPS, and I'll mention why later. An entire gear of this character, it's probably below 15 divines, so as you can see, if I wanted to, I could push it even further beyond, but I think the current state is already enough to show my point. A normal build that is not around stacking just crit damage can very easily get around 600 to 800 crit damage. Easily, without compromising investment in defense or spending mirrors of currency on it. So what is the problem? There are in general two problems that create this abomination. The first one is pretty obvious, there's just too much crit damage overall. In the tree and equipment part is fairly balanced, to be honest. We need to give up a suffix spot to get a crit damage roll, and the numbers are not too high. We have like 35% on amulet, 30% on gloves, and there is a new little secret item, the unique abyss ring that drops from the abyssal boss, Kulmak Vessel. And that ring is kinda interesting, as it can roll crit damage up to 25%, with 40% crit chance, while also providing defense rolls that can give you armor, evasion or energy shield. Or you can get 10% of damage as extra elemental damage. I think they provide less damage than all of the added flat damage rings that you can get for the build. But if you are the caster, this might be a better option than the other crit rings that give you crit chance and crit damage. The values might be a bit higher on the OG rings, but at least you don't have to deal with the downside of having more mana costs, while on top still getting some extra stats, like maximum energy shield or extra damage. It's a very good option for casters as long as you don't care about the area of presence and you like just cosplaying a mole that has 1 meter range of vision. I personally used it and I really liked it, so I think it's pretty okay. But then we get to the problem with the crit damage on the tree. And there's just so much crit damage on the tree. Every small crit node gives you 15% crit damage. Why? I cannot comprehend why every small crit damage node is at 15% and not, let's say, 10. It's just way too much. And then we have also big nodes that can give even more. You have Cooked, that gives you 60% crit damage in exchange for 25 reduced defenses. Like, yeah, let's pretend that's a drawback. You have Barbaric Strength, that gives you 45% crit damage for exchange of 10% higher mana costs. But let's be real, ever since we can leech mana from elemental damage, it's not really a drawback anymore anyway. And don't get me started on this entire part of the fucking crit tree, okay? This place is crazy, it gives you so much stats, it's ridiculous. It gives you crit chance, crit damage, extra damage after critting, which is always, because when you play crit damage you're gonna crit a lot. And all of that in a single place. All stats that you want, a damage, a crit and a crit damage. Probably we should get some nerfs onto this place. But let's say you're just an average build. You have base 100% crit damage. Let's say you have 40% crit damage on your gear. And let's continue with taking those 3 crit clusters. Because let's be real, every crit attack build will take those 3 trees. And after all, it's only like 25 points investment, aside of some travel nodes, but you might path towards them anyway, so I'm not gonna include the travel nodes. But let's think about what you get. Those 25 points will give you 250% crit damage, 100% crit chance, 1% base crit chance, some strength and intelligence, as well as 70% increased damage if you crit recently. Which means that we have doubled our chance to crit, while also the crit damage is currently sitting on 400%. And you know, that number might not look crazy yet, but that's where the funky crit multiplying calculations come in. We have Overextend support, which will give you 30% more crit damage for a silly debuff of being dazed. If you kill enemy in one hit anyway, it's not like they can stun you, can they now? And then you have a suffix on a weapon, 2 critical damage multiplier, which is also another crit multiplier, which goes up to 25%. It's not a flat increase like you get from the passive nodes in the tree, no, it's just another multiplication. And now to make everything funnier, those 2 crit multiplicators that we get are not additive, they are multiplicative, which means they're both gonna multiply your crit damage one after another. Therefore the amount at the end is higher than if they were added. Because instead of 55% more crit damage, we actually get 62% more crit damage. Therefore our 400% crit damage that we had up to this point is now magically 650% crit damage. All you need to do is spend 25 skill points a tree and get a decent crit weapon, and now you're gonna run around with 20 to 30% chance to deal 7 times more damage. It's a bit less of an issue with mages, since the only crit multiplier that doesn't have pretty bad drawbacks is Pain Attunement, but it requires you being low life. And being low life in PoE2 is not something as casual as it is in PoE1, and requires you to either play Leech and just have low life that doesn't change when you have Energy Shield, which is pretty easy to do and sustain, or have you play Infernalist, reserve 25% of your max life with Ascendancy, and use Coward's Legacy unique belt that will make it so 75% is now your low life. But you know, there are still 2 more wild cards for crit damage. We have Infernalist Ascendancy that will give us 50% more crit damage, which will turn the current 62% more crit damage into 140% more crit damage. Why? Because reasons. The only downside is that whenever you crit you self-ignite, but to be honest it's fairly manageable, like it's not something that will constantly drain and kill you. And also if you really want to, you can take at the bottom of the tree there's a note that if majority of your support skill gems are red, you are immune to ignites, so the drawback is pretty avoidable. Or you can play Titan, and by using the 50% more effect of small nodes, which is essentially the same as getting 50% more crit damage from Infernalist, with exclusion of big nodes in that case, but also with exclusion of self-igniting and getting more effect from all different nodes as well, not just crits. Both of these create some funky, more crit damage multipliers that end up in some ridiculous numbers. If you play Infernalist or you're gonna play Titan and you try going for crit, you can very casually get to 4-digit crit damage numbers. And you know, obviously I just made this as a statement to show how ridiculous crit damage stacking is. And even if it's not the best strategy to have the best DPS, because just going crit damage alone will not give you the best outcome, because you need a good balance of base DPS, crit chance and crit damage. But I think this video still shows pretty well that when you try to get that good mix, it's probably way too easy to get the crit damage part. In terms of getting crit chance, I would say it's fairly balanced, as long as you close your eyes and pretend that Blood Mage doesn't exist, because getting flat 50% crit chance on spells is fucking ridiculous. So the main issue is that the crit damage part is way overtuned. My final statement is, please nerf crit damage, and let's add some non-crit options to the game that can compete with it. I still want precise technique from PoE1 added to the game. Obviously it would need to be rebalanced a bit, as accuracy to maximum health ratio in PoE2 is, you know, funny, because it's very easy to get 10,000 accuracy and max health is usually no higher than 3k. Yeah, it would need to have some different approach, I guess, but I still want to have precise technique in the game in one way or another. And that pretty much concludes my another complaint about crit damage in PoE2. It's been 6 months and we are still in the same place with the same issue. Jonathan, if you ever watch this, please fix. And to everyone else who's still watching and hear me say crit pretty much like once every 5 seconds, consider leaving like and sub. if you enjoyed the video. I have some interesting ideas coming up soon. I'm kinda excited for PoE1. I didn't really play much on the last league because I really did not like the mercenaries, but this time around it should be better. And if not, I have some fun video ideas for PoE2 as well. So I'm probably gonna play PoE1 for like a month, and then we're gonna go back to PoE2. So stay tuned, and see you in the next one.